such a transition to the point where people don't even get morality and conscience and virtue. Happiness is going to be something that could fulfill them eternally, transcendentally, that they would arrive at God and the perfect in truth and justice and love and goodness and home. I would want them to think happiness is something utterly superficial. In fact, I would be so concerned to do this first, because as Aristotle said a long time ago, happiness is the one thing you can choose in and for itself. Everything else is chosen for the sake of happiness. So if I can really undermine happiness, if I can really make people superficial in happiness, wow, I'm not just at first base, I'm literally between first and second. I'm doing real well because I've just undermined the entire underpinning of human consciousness and purpose in life. So if happiness falls, I got a really good chance of making virtue fall as well. So I would just come and I would just try to say to every single aspect of the culture, whether it be the media, whether it be educational institutions, whether it be the judiciary, whether it be the Congress, anything at all, I would just basically be giving them the sense that what will really make you happy is succeeding more. Who's achieving more? Who's achieving less? More achievement, that's it. More intelligence, more status, more power, and more material things. That'll make you really, really happy. And if you focus on that, why, you couldn't ask for anything more in life. But I wouldn't just stop there. I'd have to make sure that you all understood that you're just a bunch of molecules and atoms, you poor little things. You don't have a soul. You don't have a transcendent destiny. You don't have a transcendent dignity. You just got to live for, well, the world. You just have to live for what you can get from this world alone. I just don't want you thinking to yourself that you really are a transcendent mystery, that you really are created in the image of God. Oh my gosh, if you actually thought that, you might actually feel responsible to God. And if you really thought that, you might even think you're worth more than treating yourself like some piece of material, atomic particles. You would really want to make sure you made the most of your life. We couldn't have that. So we got to make sure that after we undermine happiness, we got to undermine, too, the notion of your transcendence, the fact that you have an eternal soul, the fact that you were created in the image of God. All that's just got to change. So for all intents and purposes, we got to get to a third stage. And the third stage is, I'm going to have to make sure that you know that I, the devil, right, just playing the devil here, that I don't exist. And furthermore, that there's no spiritual struggle between good and evil. It's just all about this world. It's just about your concrete situation right here and now. Don't worry about all these people who are telling you that there's some spiritual struggle between good and evil going on in the universe. Forget that. The cosmos is just a here and now. It's just you and me. Remember that movie, The Devil's Advocate, when, of course, Al Pacino playing the devil says, I'm a fan of human nature. I'm an advocate of human nature. And he then reduces human nature just to your material well-being. Perfect plot. And, of course, I not only have to make sure that you don't think there's something in your life that really could have a determinant, force, in the spiritual struggle between good and evil, that you could do something that could actually change the tide, not just of the world around you, but of the entire cosmos, of the entire divine order, that you could actually tilt the balance toward cosmic good and away from cosmic evil. Forget that. That's all just a fantasy. I'm telling you now, the devil just, he doesn't exist, and I wouldn't do anything anyway to harm anybody. Then after I'm done with all of that, I really have to get right down to the notion of morality itself. I'm really going to have to do a number, first of all, on conscience. I don't want you following your conscience. It's going to be absolutely essential for me to make sure that you really think that conscience doesn't exist. This is just some kind of, plot on the part of your parents and teachers to get you to imbibe some moral principles and teachings. You poor pathetic thing. You've been brainwashed. You've just been behaviorally conditioned since you were young. There's no such thing as a divine conscience where God can actually speak to you and rivet you to the loveliness of the good and make you so scared, horrified at evil that you can barely see straight. No, there's no God speaking through your conscience. Don't worry about that. You're just conditioned by your teachers and parents. It's just a Freudian superego. Forget all of that. And by the way, guilt is very bad. I'm not going to make you distinguish between an excessive guilt, right, and just normal guilt that you feel through your conscience. It's all bad. Excessive guilt, of course, is bad, but normal guilt is bad. You should feel good. You owe it to yourself. These bad feelings of feeling like horrified at the prospect of evil. I don't want you to be scared, by the darkness. Don't worry about the darkness. It's all going to be okay. It's all about light. Trust me on this. The key thought, of course, is I just want you to think that, conscience, this little mythical medieval thought that people have. We're so modern today. Trust me on this. I can tell you for a fact, there's no such thing as conscience. And if there were, God certainly wouldn't be speaking through it. You can bet on one thing for sure. You can bet that it's all about what you're feeling right now. And skip the parental and the teacher church brainwashing. Skip your little super ego and do what you want. That's the fullest manifestation of you. It's all about you. And then, if I were the evil spirit, I'd go even further. I'd have to get rid of moral principle and moral responsibility. And if I were to devise a perfect plot to get rid of the idea of moral principle, I'd say, how about an excessive view of tolerance, where you basically say that you don't want to offend anybody. So whatever you do, don't bring out your moral principles in public. It could be offensive. And we know that the number one principle is don't be offensive. It's not about right or wrong, good character or evil character. It's about offending people or not offending people. It's about being nice. Don't you see? It's just about being nice. And if you're a nice person, you know what to do. You're not going to offend anybody. Don't bring out those principles in public. I know they just want to go for a little bit of genocide, but you have to be well-mannered. I mean, what's more important? A few people dying in a death camp or manners? Come on. I mean, we do have to be nice. But you can see that the most important strategy that we have in the culture of nice is to make sure that we don't do anything offensive, like bring out a principle that's going to make somebody feel uncomfortable. Keep your principles to yourself. And while you're at it, if you're going to keep them to yourself, don't even keep them for yourself. Come on, be realistic. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not going to have it for the world or for somebody else, why even have them for you? Skip these things like moral principles. What really matters is how you feel about your conduct. Principles just confuse the matter, says the devil, right? Principles are just going to be something that you will kind of mitigate your feelings. You know by your feelings what's good. If it feels good to kill Joker, do what feels good. Your feelings don't lie. You don't need objectivity. You don't need the discursive power of thought. Just follow your intuition. It's right. I can tell you it's right. Now, if I were the devil, I wouldn't just stop there. I actually try to undermine every moral authority that's out there. And of course, the best moral authority to undermine is the church. So I would probably, if I were the devil, I'd probably say to myself and say to you, hey, you know, there's scandals going on in the church right now. And by the way, you cannot let anybody off the hook here. The church has to be judged by her sinners and not by her saints. And furthermore, says the devil, when you judge the church by her sinners, why, you'd have to judge the church by darkness instead of the light. Don't let any light into the darkness. Reality is darkness, says the devil. I'm telling you this. So I want you to take that darkness and make it outshine that light. And then you'll know that there's no such thing as a church authority. I don't care how good Jesus Christ was, says the devil. I don't care how good the saints are. I don't care how good, you know, the church leadership is. What I want you to do is focus on the dark. I am the accuser, and I want you to focus on the dark. And when you do, then you'll know there's no authority but yourself. No authority from God, no authority from the church. It's all darkness out there. You're the light. You're the only light. You go ahead and do what you think is right. All by yourself. You don't need silly church teachings. Anyway, you're autonomous and you're enlightened. I assure you, you can do it. Guiding principles, church teachings, nonsense. It's all about you. But then I'd have to go a little further than that. I'd actually have to try and also subjectivize morality to the best extent that I could. So I would basically attempt in some way then to tell you that all moral claims are just fictions. You know what I mean? You know, everybody can see there's a camera over there. That's a fact. Nobody has any trouble judging that fact. Or people can know science. Science gets to objectivity, and indeed it really does. But I mean, a moral claim, you know, like killing is wrong or lying is wrong, who says so? I mean, you know, after all, that's just a matter of opinion. Oh, you know, go ahead and ask any group of college students. Just go right into the classroom and say, hey, you know, does anybody believe that there's really such a thing as objective morality? That there's objective moral principles? I mean, if I were the devil, I would just simply say, you know, it all seems like a bunch of subjective opinions to me. Believe what you want. What you say is what's good and evil. Everything else is for the devil. Yes, the devil can actually quote himself in the opposite fashion. For all intents and purposes, then, if you begin to undermine all these dimensions of morality, you undermine moral principles, you undermine conscience, you undermine church authority and teaching authority of Christ, you undermine moral claims, and you subjectivize everything, there's nothing left. We're kind of like dear old Thomas More, right? And Thomas More, now St. Thomas More, is talking to his son and basically says, when all is said and done and you take out all of the laws and you put all those laws, cut down all the trees, where will you hide when the devil turns on you, son? Exactly. Where would you hide? And of course, for all intents and purposes, that is the difficulty of the culture today. We are left with almost complete subjectivization of morals, no moral principle, the undermining of conscience. It's a perfect plot. But then there's just three other elements I'd have to really get done in order to make it the perfect plot. The undermining of virtue, the undermining of morality, the undermining of God's will. Next thing on my checklist would be freedom. I'd have to superficialize freedom. I basically have to show you that freedom is not about getting what's most pervasive, enduring, and deep. Freedom is not about living up to your eternal destiny, your eternal dignity. Freedom is not about trying to make the most of what God has created you for in His own image. Freedom is really, I'm telling you now as the devil, freedom is really about getting your strongest emotional desire satisfied right now. That's what I'm telling you, and it feels good. I'm not kidding you. You can go ahead and get all those desires fulfilled. And the other side of that coin is, avoid any kind of commitment or constraint. No one has the right to constrain you. The first thing in your life, the first dimension of your freedom is you are you. And you have no responsibilities to anyone. And you shouldn't have to answer to anyone, because you are a law unto yourself. Skip commitments and be yourself. And skip constraint and be yourself. And responsibility, what a laughable self-constraint that is, and a plot of the church as well. By the time we're all done here, you'll know who you are. You're meant to get your strongest emotional desires satisfied, and you ought to feel really frustrated and angry when you can't. And you're all about escaping commitments and constraints and responsibility, and you ought to feel really, really lucky when you can escape all those things, and frustrated when you can't. But then I go a little further, just to top it all off. What I then say is, I would also put out this incredibly important notion of love. You can't be too sure about love. You know what I'm saying? Love could actually liberate somebody. So as the devil, you got to be really careful to superficialize love. So the one thing you want to do right from the get-go is to make sure that people see love is all about being loved. Get it? You just black is white and white is black. You just reverse it. So the devil comes and says, love is what feels good. Love is about being in the moment. Love is about being loved. Feeling that love coming to you from somebody else. Not going in the other direction. Not fulfilling somebody else. Not self-gift, but self-receipt. And of course, we know that if we're fully autonomous and we're all about ourselves, then it must be the case that love is meant for us. We're the center of the universe. Our happiness is all about ego-comparative happiness. We don't have a soul. It's just right now. You got to grab for all the gusto you can get right now. And as a matter of fact, when you start looking at the entire panoply of love, let's just face it. Love is a feeling. And don't be getting any other thoughts in your mind like love is kind of a commitment that's going to unleash a power that's going to do good for the world or good for your family. That's all a myth. I'm telling you right now, if you really want to get right down to it, love's a feeling. You deserve it. It's all about you. And furthermore, you just want to be in the moment and let people love you. And you just want to be that person who can essentially be the focus of people's attention. That's love. And while we're at it, one final little plot. One final little thing to just get things off the ground if I were the devil. I would basically undermine the notion of romantic love, what's called eros. And I would make sure that people know that sexual gratification is more important than commitment. And I would want people to know that there's nothing else to live for than to be gratified by another human being instead of to give yourself contributively to another human being. I would make sure that you never brought God into the equation of romance at all. Never brought family into it. Never brought the feelings of another human being into it. Never let your responsibility and commitment to another human being ever have anything to do with that notion of romantic love. Romance is for you. Romance is a feeling. Romance is about your gratification. Now, if I were the devil and I would devise a perfect plot, I would say, let's just start from the top. Let's undermine happiness and make it really superficial so that people are just going to be materialistically concerned. And let's, while we're at it, make sure you know you don't have a soul. Let's make sure while we're at it that there's no devil. I'm not really here, says the devil. And there's no spiritual struggle between good and evil. There's no, way in which you're going to have an effect on some kind of a higher plane of existence within the cosmos. It's just you, and it's just the here and now. And furthermore, let's just take morality apart. Let's just undermine conscience and call it a fiction. While we're at it, let's just undermine moral principle. And let's just say that moral principles have to be abandoned for the sake of kindness and niceness and tolerance. And let's just say that all moral claims are merely subjective and that they're just opinions. And everybody's got an opinion. And so there's no objectivity to morality at all. It's not like the camera being out there. And while we're at it, let's just undermine the authority of the church and make sure that no church and Jesus Christ has nothing to say about morality at all. That really morality is about me and the choices that I make. And while we're at it, let's just undermine the notion of freedom and make it completely superficial so that we think that getting our strongest emotional desires satisfied right now, that's what the real purpose of life is. And that's what the way to my real fulfillment. And while we're at it, let's just undermine the notion of love and superficialize it. Undermine the notion of romantic love and superficialize that. Get family out of there. Get church out of there. Get Jesus Christ out of there. If I were the devil and I wanted to make a perfect plot to completely undermine virtue in the lives, in the hearts, and in the minds of really, really good people, why, I think I would do all of those things. And indeed, look at our culture. Look at the bylines. Look at the slogans. Look at what our kids are getting in the media. Look at what they're getting through supposedly educational establishments. Look at what they're getting through the judiciary. They're getting the entire dimension of the perfect plot to kill and undermine virtue. But the devil will not be victorious, for God will make his rejoinder. And in the next session, we'll talk about God's rejoinder and what we can do to make ourselves, put ourselves into the full light of God and to bring ourselves into our eternal, our transcendental dignity and destiny with him. Stay tuned to our next episode.
Purchase a DVD copy of this program, Virtue, Freedom, and Faith, please visit the EWTN Religious Catalog web store at www.ewtnrc.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316 and ask for item number HDVFF.
Hello, I'm Janet Dunkervig. Stay tuned for Women of Grace coming up next on EWTN.
Without sounding corny, I've never had a bad day as a priest.
They're building a culture open to the priesthood.